Hello, everyone. Okay, I still see quite a few coming in. We'll give it just another minute and then we'll get started. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, I guess, are we ready to get started?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on behalf of the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub for this session on somebody watching and letting people in the waiting room.
Yeah, I'm letting people know.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for a WEC webinar on supporting rural women entrepreneurs through COVID and beyond. My name is Megan Trush, and I'll be sitting in for our director, our fearless leader, Dr. Wendy Sukier, who unfortunately is under the weather today and couldn't join us. The Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub is a national network of organizations serving women entrepreneurs. We have 10 regional hubs located all across Canada, including and led by a couple of our panelists today. We are normally engaged in holding events and publishing reports, as well as building out a set of digital tools that can be accessed and used to support women entrepreneurship in Canada. Let's see, sorry. So if you would like to follow along and follow us on Twitter, you can do so at WEC_PCFE and use the hashtag WEC to engage in this conversation and others in the weeks ahead. I'd like to first and foremost acknowledge that the work that we do, most of our team is based in Toronto. It takes place on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, which is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Our regional hubs and partners across Canada similarly gather on the traditional territory of many of Canada's Indigenous nations who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. So on the topic of rural entrepreneurship, we know from the upcoming State of Women Entrepreneurship report, which will be launched in just a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for the invite, that there are key differences in the support needed by women entrepreneurs. Urban areas are more likely to have majority women-owned businesses than rural areas. Women entrepreneurs are more likely to have businesses in the service industries, such as retail, accommodations, food services, and tourism, and less likely to be in sectors such as agriculture, forestry, fishing, hunting, mining, construction, and manufacturing, which are more prevalent in rural areas. One of the most significant challenges that rural entrepreneurs tend to face is a lack of infrastructure, and especially a lack of digital infrastructure. Wendy had written a report that was published last year, which can be found on the Diversity Institute's website, about rural broadband and how access to technology is not only important to support digital businesses, but to support access to human and supply chain networks as well. The gaps in digital infrastructure are even more pronounced for Indigenous communities. A 2007 report from INAC, the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada, calculated the cost of this gap to be $9.7 billion. And many northern and remote Indigenous communities are at risk of being left behind without access to broadband or digital services, as so many more things are moving online. In 2016, the CRTC, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Corporation, published a report and stated that broadband access is an essential service and that Canadians should have access to broadband internet capable of at least 50 megabytes per second for download speed, regardless of location and urbanity, I suppose. Currently, about 85% of Canadians have access to broadband of this speed and capacity, but that number drops to only 40% for rural communities. Additionally, only about 24% of households in Indigenous communities have access to this level of speed. And so you can kind of see the implications when you think about the structural barriers to women's entrepreneurship in rural areas and in the North. From a recently released report on women's agriculture entrepreneurship in Saskatchewan from our wonderful moderator and co-host today who leads the Saskatchewan Regional Hub, we found significant underrepresentation of women in agricultural entrepreneurship, with only 25% of farm operators in Saskatchewan and approximately 30% nationally being women. In this webinar, the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub and our wonderful moderator, Dr. Gina Grandy, will discuss the particular needs and challenges of rural women entrepreneurs and some of the programs available to support them through COVID and beyond. At the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, since COVID has entered into our lives and our worlds, we've moved fairly quickly into coming up with first understanding what was happening on the ground in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, as well as pulling together information and resources on a website, our website, for the types of supports and services and tools that women entrepreneurs can use to navigate these uncertain times. There is information related to a number of the government support programs that are available, including the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, the Canadian Agricultural Partnerships COVID-19 Response Initiative, as well as a number of other supports that are available. Sorry, just checking the chat. And so I guess without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our moderator today. Dr. Gina Grandy is a professor and dean for the Hill and Levine Schools of Business. She is a professor in strategy and leadership, and she commenced her role as dean in July of 2018. Previously, she held the role of Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Studies and was the holder of the RBC Women in Leadership Scholar at the school. Gina is the lead for the WEC Regional Hub in Saskatchewan, and their focus for 2020 is on women entrepreneurs in agriculture.
And Megan, I'm going to make you stop there so you don't read the rest of what you have there. That's more than enough for an introduction.
Well, yes, all right.
Great. Thank you very much. And Megan, I didn't mean to cut you off in regards to what else you wanted to say other than in regards to my long bio. So I think that's certainly enough. Was there anything else, Megan, you wanted to add before we started?
Not at all. I mean, the only other thing that I would add is that while the panel and presentations are ongoing, we would ask that participants who are not speaking place themselves on mute and turn off their video so that we are not using precious broadband from those who are participating from rural settings. Thank you. Over to you, Gina.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction and for all of you who are joining us today for the Rural Entrepreneurship webinar. We are curious to know who's joining us today, and I know a number of you have already introduced yourself in the chat. I believe that PAX is going to do a Zoom poll just to get a sense of the types of organizations that you represent, and that'll help us guide the discussion that'll follow our panel to come. So you have a couple of choices there. So I'll let you do that at your leisure. I would like to introduce our two guests who will share their insights and experiences with rural women's entrepreneurship. First, we have Rosalind Lockyer, founder and CEO of PARO, Center for Women's Enterprise. Together with 20 years of working as a teacher, entrepreneur, and community developer, Rosalind became blatantly aware of the many systemic issues that kept women from achieving their life goals. In 1995, she founded PARO Center for Women's Enterprise, channeling this experience, her passion, and determination to continue to work for positive change locally, provincially, nationally, and internationally. Today, PARO is recognized as the largest peer lending network in North America, supporting its unique form of women-centered community economic development with more than 150 PARO circles located across Ontario. In 2005, Northern Ontario Business awarded her the prestigious Influential Woman of Northern Ontario Award Public Sector, recognizing her leadership in building PARO into the dynamic organization that it is today, servicing women entrepreneurs living in rural, urban, and remote communities of Ontario. Rosalind has dedicated her lifetime towards supporting gender equality and building sustainable livelihoods for thousands of women who need it the most. Important to her is her role as founder and CEO of PARO and co-founder of the national group, the Women's Economic Council, is supporting women who are disadvantaged by the intersectionality of poverty, race, sexism, ageism, and disability. She is also the treasurer for the International E-Rotary for Social Innovators and a board director for the Ontario on the Women's Enterprise Organizations of the Canadian Board, and is a member of the Gender Equity Network of Canada. She has been called one of the most remarkable social entrepreneurs in the world by the Office of the Social Enterprise, Medi Ontario Government, and received the International Award for Woman of the Decade in Community Leadership from the Women's Economic Forum in 2018 in New Delhi, India. So welcome, Roz. We also have with us Joella Hogan, who is the owner of the Yukon Soaps company. Joella is a member of the First Nations of Nacho-Nyak-Dun in Mayo, Yukon, and of the Crow clan. She is passionate about preserving her Northern Shoshone heritage and culture. With a background in environmental science and community planning, she has spent 15 years working for her First Nation as manager of heritage and culture. She bought the Yukon Soaps company in 2012 as something she referred to as on the side, but she comes from a family of entrepreneurs, so it is no surprise that it has grown into her passion. Joella holds a deep respect for the land. She sees herself as a steward of the land and an advocate for clean water, fair trade, and the power of plants. She is passionate about creating products that are natural, ethical, high quality, and authentic. The Yukon Soaps Company offers its customers soap bars that honor Indigenous knowledge and are made with plants from the boreal forest and support community. The Yukon Soaps Company was the winner of the 2019 Indigenous Business of the Year in the Yukon and was featured by Huffington Post US as one of 14 Native-owned beauty and skincare brands to fall in love with. Joella has a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Planning and a Master's in Native and Rural Development. And I am going to use this as an opportunity to give a plug, last night I was on her website and ordering soaps, so I encourage all of you as well to check out her website and her product. So Joella, I welcome you as well today. I am looking forward to learning from both you, Roz, and Joella, so that in our WEC Saskatchewan hub, we are better positioned to support rural women entrepreneurs. Before I start with my questions to the panel, I think it's useful to give some context around what we mean by rural entrepreneurship. And I think it's important to acknowledge that rural entrepreneurship varies. For me, rural entrepreneurship acknowledges geography, and simply put, that which is located outside of urban regions. But it's also important to recognize that some rural entrepreneurial ventures are more embedded than others in their geographic space, such that place is integral to how rural entrepreneurs do business by their use of local resources and interconnectedness with rural people and communities. As Megan has mentioned, rural regions represent, the overwhelming land of Canada, but they also face significant challenges as it relates to entrepreneurship and more broadly. We know very little about the experiences of rural women entrepreneurs from a research and a practice perspective. We hope from this discussion, we start to build a better understanding for both the opportunities and the challenges. Megan made reference to a report that we recently released from our WEC hub in Saskatchewan. We engaged in a project to better understand the experiences of women entrepreneurs in agriculture. We released a report on women ag entrepreneurship in Saskatchewan from our hub at Hill and Levine Schools of Business at University of Regina in early June. We found a significant underrepresentation of women in agricultural entrepreneurship across the country, with only 25% of farm operators in Saskatchewan and approximately 30% nationally being women. We acknowledge that the number of women ag entrepreneurs, specifically farm operators, is likely higher than this, and this is one issue we need to consider in regards to how we are accounting for women ag entrepreneurs. We also concluded that based on both the existing research and from our interviews, women entrepreneurs in rural and agricultural sectors often face discrimination, a lack of access to capital, and the perpetuation of stereotypes around how women should be in traditional family farm positions, and positioning them primarily responsible for unpaid work, such as domestic and caregiving work or other undervalued tasks. In our report, we highlight a number of recommendations to advance women entrepreneurs in ag, and I have no doubt today our conversations will spark further ideas so that we can build upon this initial work that we have completed to date. Without further ado, I am going to move now to our panel, to Roz and to Joella, and we're going to have a conversation for about 20-25 minutes. And I have questions for both of them, and we'll be switching back and forth. Following that conversation, we will open up the conversation more widely to hear what's on your mind, and we'll engage in a larger conversation. So Roz, I assume you're there with me.
I can't turn on my video because someone is disallowing it. The host has stopped my video.
Well, you are with us, and I believe
start my video.
Okay, there we go. So good to see you, Roz. And what's really interesting is I believe both Roz and I are in Newfoundland. We're in different parts, I think, of the province, but neither of us live in Newfoundland full time, but we are both in Newfoundland right now. So Roz, I'll start with you. What are some of the particular needs of rural women entrepreneurs, and what are some of the particular challenges rural women face in their entrepreneurship journey? And how has your experience as a longtime service provider helped bridge some of these gaps?
Well, thanks for inviting me today. And I am in rural Newfoundland. So if I get cut out, I will try to get back in. And you can just, Gina, ask a question of our other guest. I also want to say hi to so many familiar names. I'm not seeing everyone's faces, but I see so many familiar names. And you know, as a service provider, your partners are so important. And Pero, Center for Women's Enterprise in Ontario, we partner constantly with all the CFDCs. And I see, you know, Amber said some kind words for me there because she is a CEO with one of the CFDCs. And we have partnership agreements with them. And we work together to make sure that women are given all the support that they can. I also see Sandra there from WEOC, and I don't know, I think it was written maybe in the interpretation, it was wrong, but it's Women's Enterprise Organizations of Canada, and Sandra represents WEC Manitoba, and I represent Pero on that board of directors, and that's a pan-Canadian network. These networks are very, very important if women are going to take their rightful place as women entrepreneurs, especially in rural communities. I think that today we're having to look at the new future, what it will look like. And I think rural entrepreneurs are going to play an increasingly important part of that economic environment. And I see that happening, and I suggest that so all this research and discussions, roundtables, etc., around that topic are extremely important as people are moving out of large city centers, feeling that it's not safe and for health reasons. And COVID has sort of amplified that message to us. So what's that going to mean to women? Right now, women in rural areas, before the pandemic, we increasingly heard from women that they are struggling with cell service, telephone service, also with technology, Wi-Fi, access to Wi-Fi, and so on. When we started doing surveys as we moved to do our work remotely, asking women how they were doing and what challenges they were having, number one on the list was, you know, the Wi-Fi is terrible. And even if we can't get on Zoom and we try the telephone and we get cut out. So this has got to stop. That's got to be a very big priority for Canada when they're looking at supporting women entrepreneurs across the country. So I think we've mentioned it a couple of times now, but those of us who are in remote and rural communities doing our work, it really is a significant, you just can't get your work done. You can't talk to people. You're constantly struggling through meetings, contacting people to be able to talk to a client where you can't travel to the client, you have no other way to do the work. So that's really important. Number two, I would say, is childcare and elder care. And we certainly saw that amplified with the problems with long-term care for elders and the problems with daycare. In rural communities, there were very few choices for childcare and elder care, and oftentimes it depended on the family to provide those services. That is increasingly difficult in industry-based towns because of the shift work and so on. So it often was left up to the woman to be more flexible with her business time, to look after the children and the elders. So again, that's an area that we're struggling with now, you know, during this pandemic, is how can women be doing their work as entrepreneurs, because they have most of the responsibility for childcare and elder care. So that is a really big problem. And when we're talking about work and life balance, it takes on a whole new meaning in rural communities of trying to do that. Transportation, I put down as number 3, but it's about marketing, getting to the clients. It's always a struggle to market in small communities. You can't just buy an ad in the local paper and that's going to reach everybody. You have to reach outside your local community to be able to get the mass that you need to have a good market. Increasingly now, where everyone is on social media marketing their business the best way they can, the competition is quite high. In a very large geographical area like Ontario, with sparse populations in the rural areas, what do you do? How do you market your business? And you can't network now. I mean, you can network online to some degree, but it's not the same. So that's an increasing problem that we have to deal with. It was there before, but now it's much different. So, long distance travel that one did before to support business to business activity or business to individual is now pretty well at a standstill. So where do we go from here? It's very complex when you're doing business in a rural community. It's amplified over and over if you're in an Indigenous community. Right now, the only people going into Indigenous communities are essential services. So if you want to do business with the Indigenous communities, or the Indigenous women want to do business outside, it is very, very difficult. The fourth one I had on my list was access to suppliers. Again, when you live in a rural community, it's not like picking up the phone and they're very close by and you can go over and get your supplies. There's very little competition around suppliers and even access to suppliers. So you have to now go online for most of the suppliers. And if you talk to anyone in business across Canada now, they're saying access to supplies is a huge challenge. Construction industry, it's almost impossible to get the wood products, for example. So this is not going to get better. It's getting worse. So access to supplies always was difficult. It's also a huge cost for shipping. If you live in a rural community, the shipping costs, and then on top of that, you've got the HST on your shipping costs, etc. That amplifies the expenses that you have, plus the difficulty in getting your supplies so you can manufacture your product, or even to provide a service. You have to have some access to suppliers. And the last one I'm going to speak of, and I mean, I could go on all day with this, but the last one I'm going to speak about is the tourism, retail, and accommodation industry. In rural communities, this is a huge industry. People coming into the rural communities seasonally, and for the activities and the resources, to fish, fly in communities to resorts, you name it. And even people coming into rural communities to do business, all of that became at a standstill. And I found that in our surveys, it was the tourism, business, accommodation, and retail, of course, that were hurt the most. When the government put the money out for rent was a huge issue. It had to go through the owners of the property, and oftentimes they didn't want to apply to get that support. So women were really calling us in great angst, trying to hang on, losing their inventory going out of date, no customers, everyone canceling their accommodation and their tours, etc. in tourism, and they didn't know what was happening. And, for Delta Canada or Hilton hotels, yes, it's a struggle for them too. But if you're, you know, a woman in a very small community in Northern Ontario and you're the only motel in town, but there's no one coming to your door, it's taking the money out of your family's pocket to survive. So, and we need those places. People need places to stay. They need activities and recreational activities to look forward to in the summer to get them out of the cities. And that's only going to be more so in the future. So those are the areas that I chose to talk about to answer your question, Gina. And I'm so happy I was able to stay on video. So thanks everyone for turning off your cameras, although I'd love to see your beautiful faces.
Thank you so much, Roz. One of the challenges you talked about was in regards to transportation. And Joella, if I switch to you for a second, in an interview at one point, you talked about the cost of shipping as one of the challenges that you faced as a rural woman entrepreneur. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and perhaps some of the other challenges that you've experienced as a rural woman entrepreneur and how that coincides with that long list of challenges that Roz has talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, and good to see everybody on the call from across Canada that do feel pretty isolated for sure. So just for a bit of like geography context first. So up in the Yukon and then 4 hours north of Whitehorse in a little community called Mayo. That's just over 400 people, but it is a community of entrepreneurs. So we're all able to support each other, but I'll talk a bit about that later. But I guess just with regards to shipping, that it really adds to the product that I create, the cost of that product that then gets put onto the consumers, because so much of what I need to make soap and my other products, of course, I'm importing from other places, all of those base ingredients. And so then shipping it back out, and it's, you know, it's a constant struggle. I mean, even this morning I'm ordering my stuff, and sometimes I have to shift from Canada Post to a trucking company and trying to coordinate with that, because I'm trying to buy in large quantities, like so massive bulk, which is, you know, more cash up front, but savings in the long run. So to be able to have that kind of cash there is difficult. And then getting the product out. And so, I mean, it's on my website, but I charge a flat rate of $17. And so, you know, I think Canadians, we gasp at that, but it's, you know, it's the cost of what shipping is. And when I explain to people like where I am, and, you know, sometimes I make a little joke about how it's coming via dog sled, or, you know, the postal workers are on snowshoes, or those kinds of things, you know, people get it because they're trying to buy product and support this business that's way up north. And so people understand the length of time it gets and then the cost. What I find interesting though is, of course, in the US, like shipping is so incredibly cheap, if not free, but I still have an incredible following in the US. Like I ship nonstop to the US. And so they're willing to pay that price. Now I kind of forget where I was going with that, but just that, I guess it's really, I feel like it's a barrier, but people must see the worth to invest and to pay that cost of shipping. So I was actually on a call yesterday with some other small businesses in the Yukon and talking about creating a working group to deal with the shipping issue, because so many people that are creating product in the Yukon, we're all faced with this same issue. And so what does that look like? Is it drop shipping from Southern Canada? Is it, you know, a bunch of us suppliers all ship our stuff together, you know, just trying to find ways to make it work so that it's easier for less and less cost on the consumer.
Great. Thank you, Joella. Joella, and I think in some ways perhaps it's implied in what you said, but do you want to share any observations how some of the challenges that you've faced as a woman rural entrepreneur, or even some of the comments made by Roz outside of that? And then, of course, with the added challenge of COVID-19 on top of it, Any observations around how some of these challenges particularly impact Indigenous women entrepreneurs?
Well, I think it's a lot just to do with like access to resources and being able to link people. And so I have been able to connect with so many different networks over the past few years. So I try to share that information with other people that might not have that same access. So it's certainly about building those support networks outside of Canada or outside of the Yukon, but also in our community. So going back to shipping, like I sell a lot in gift shops throughout the Yukon. I never send Canada Post because that would kill all of us. And so I totally rely on friends and family and people in the community. You know, I put a blip on Facebook and everybody wants to help and get that and have their car smell lovely and that kind of thing. So it's about that community network. I think, you know, one of the biggest obstacles that we see for First Nations communities is because often we don't own our homes. So I live in First Nation homes. So be able to get a commercial mortgage because I'm trying to expand outside of my home, that has caused me huge problems. So even if I have the cash equity, that I don't own my own house. So that's a barrier that, you know, is pretty common up here. And I believe across Canada for Indigenous women. And I think, you know, so many of the same issues that Rosalind talked about, like just being in the north, being isolated, and trying to build that network. I think that First Nations women up here sometimes have a hard time like speaking up and sharing what they're doing. And so, you know, I'm a part of different networks where we're really trying to amplify each other's voices because it's easier for other people to share your story sometimes than yourself. So that really works. So I'm continually trying to uplift and amplify, you know, other small business, Indigenous women business to get their stuff out there because people are doing wonderful things, creating wonderful products that, you know, the world needs to see. And so getting that voice up there to a level because, you know, there's so, yeah, just amplifying it.
If I recall correctly as well, Joella, on your website, you do also feature other products by other entrepreneurs as well. Is that right?
Yeah, so what I have is a line of soap. Oh, just lost my earring. A line of soap where I took pictures of beadwork. So not beadwork on the earrings I'm wearing, but similar. So I take a photo and then I imprint it actually on dissolvable paper and embed that into the soap. And then each soap shares the story of these 8 different women in the community, some who have passed away and some who are still with us and creating beautiful pieces. But I just thought it was a way to share about, you know, the wonderful, you know, the art that's coming from here. But so just, and all of those pieces, because when people are creating beadwork, it's often for a family member, graduation, you know, it's to symbolize something. And so each of those soaps shares that story. But it's funny because one of the things is that nobody uses those soaps. Everybody says they're too pretty to use. So then I struggle a bit with that because they're beautiful and people love them, but it's hard for me if people aren't using them also.
Well, that's right, because they need to use them so that they can actually buy another one, right? Or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rosalind, you know, do you think that there are unique opportunities for women entrepreneurs, and have they been able to access government support programs when we think about rural women entrepreneurs? And Joella has made reference to really that sense of community that is an opportunity that surfaces for rural women entrepreneurs. Does that reflect what you have seen as well? And are there other opportunities out there that women rural entrepreneurs can take advantage of?
Yes, and you know, many of the government supports, women didn't fit the criteria. They were more aimed at the larger businesses, and you know, if it was a seasonal business, they didn't fit. I mean, the government did try to change it as time went by. I know we sent in our results from our surveys every week to the government, the voice of the women so that they could hear, and they did act on much of it. But most of the women that we work with, they fell back on our peer lending circles because that infrastructure was already there and they understood it. And it included the women in their network, in their communities that were supporting each other anyway. So they needed to talk to each other and they needed to work together to come through this pandemic. So the circles, our peer lending circles, provide grants and loans to women, but they're, you know, small groups of women in communities all across Ontario. So one difference that COVID made was we used to have our circles only in communities where we could drive to. And as soon as we went remote and women were looking for answers about how to access support, even those areas that we weren't working in, they were contacting us through our website and etc. So we now do our peer lending circles throughout Ontario, and that was probably the prime way that we could support women with money and quickly. We could turn that around quickly because it was there. So, and we could work with them remotely to provide the training and support they needed, but also the grants and the loans that they needed. And at the same time, try to help them access any government support that there was. And we do that by partnering as well. So we partner with all the CFDCs, and then for areas that weren't covered by the CFDCs, we have developed a partnership with Alternative Savings, the credit union, and they are supporting us with the investment funds for the loans in communities where there's no CFDC. So that's covered the whole province. And when you partner, right, the CFDCs are always also providing financial supports to the entrepreneurs. We know more about what they're doing. Alterna is providing supports as a bank. So by working together as a service provider with the women, we can find all the sources of funding that will support them in these difficult times. And out of COVID, we also have a program for Northern Ontario through the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy that supports women through the Biz Growth Program, and that's funding up to $5,000 in a grant or up to $7,500. And that's all grant dollars, and we're just recently spinning that out, and you'll see other programs coming out through the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy Fund. And I think that that'll make a whole lot of difference for the women because over and over in the surveys, they said to us, we don't need loans now. You know, a lot of the government programs were loans, and we don't need loans, we need grants. So I was really happy that we were able to access the funds to support them through this grant program. We have one stream that will be pushing out through till the end of March in 2021, and another program that will be extended into 2022. So I think that, you know, this will provide support for them to plan how to pivot, and also at the same time be poised for growth coming out of COVID, and give them some resources. And we weren't able to provide PPE or infrastructure supports through this programming. So PARO has put in 10% of their own funds to complement that through these programming. So we're optimistic that with this ongoing support for the women that we're working with, that we can get through this. But it's going to be, like I started, you know, it's really important as service providers that partners work together. You know, within WEOC, one of the most important things for me here in Ontario is to hear what they're doing in BC and what NLO is doing in Newfoundland, right? Because we're not in competition with each other. We're in the same game. the women's movement is really important. And we have to realize that we're all part of that. And we have to make sure that we do everything we can to have equity for women entrepreneurs. To stop the bias, the systems that don't support women in the way that they should. So thank you.
Thank you, Roz. Thank you very much. And, when we talk about as well, one of the gifts of WEC is that opportunity to bring everyone together and, to bring all of the service organizations together. So we have that platform to share. Roz, from the work that we recently completed at the Saskatchewan WEC on women ag entrepreneurs in Saskatchewan,
Yes.
despite the many and diverse contributions of women in farming, there's still gendered divisions of labor. The discourse of the traditional farming positions women as primarily responsible for unpaid work. And in many ways, really by extension, they are incomplete farmers. That picture isn't an accurate portrayal, though, of the women who do that work, of those women farmers, the women that we spoke with, or even women in ag more broadly. Fortunately, in the work that we did, the women entrepreneurs in ag across a broad range of related fields talked about how it is changing and that there are opportunities, but clearly more needs to be done. Roz, what do you think are some of the best ways to confront and challenge the stereotypes around entrepreneurial women in rural communities, especially those in agriculture and resource extraction sectors?
The women don't need to change, right? It's the systems and the biases that need to change. But we need to empower women and provide the information that they need so that they can speak up for themselves when needed. You see young AOC down in United States, and she said, I want to stand by my parents. They didn't raise me to be abused by men. And I think as women entrepreneurs, we need to keep women entrepreneurs empowered, and they can be empowered by the women's movement, by, connecting with each other and learning how to express themselves and promote themselves in a way that we can see how great they are. I mean, part of it is looking for the success stories in the mining industry and in agriculture, and as service providers and as media and so on, as organizations and other entrepreneurs, to promote each other in a way that shows the real worth of what we're doing. And it's not that we have to change, we just need to learn how to do that better, because we're doing good work. As entrepreneurs, we're doing good work as women entrepreneurs, and that needs to be seen. But there are many systems that have, been in place many, many years, and it's very hard to break down systems. And you'll only do that through the women's movement and connecting with each other to do that. So I think that that's imperative. So yes, be a part of, the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, be a part of WEOC, and be a part of WEC, be a part of SEDNet, be a part of any organization that you can, that where you can promote and advocate for women entrepreneurs. I think that's the only way we're going to change. Right now, one of the things that we're doing, which really came out of a need for, like, CFDCs were doing programming, Para was doing programming, and we wanted to support the women entrepreneurs. And oftentimes the industry too, like mining and so on, they ask us for a list of women entrepreneurs that they can do business with. So we're talking about supplier diversity. They say, well, give us a list, Roz, and that's one of the things we're doing right now, a women's, B2B database list of women's businesses in Ontario, so that when someone says, well, give us a list, Roz, we're going to have it right there. And I think that we all need to have that list. you know, and support each other, because, you know, rather than be in competition, be in co-opetition, because we, you know, all boats rise with the tide here in Newfoundland. As you know, Gina, you're probably looking at the water, and I'm on the water, actually. I'm in a boat. So so we know all boats rise with the tide, and I think that that's how we have to see things. Women are very resourceful. You know, we're very good at, we're very intuitive, we're nurturing, you know, but we need to make sure that we promote each other and provide each other with all the support that we can to move forward. And by the way, any women entrepreneurs on the list or any service providers, make sure you send them to Paro to be on the list of women entrepreneurs that can provide service to other women entrepreneurs and to the mining sector and the agri sector and so on and so forth. So those are some of the solutions that I see. Thank you.
Thanks, Roz. And you raised so many important points. And one of the things in particular that I want to also emphasize is that, you know, this isn't about changing women.
Yep.
And I think that's critically important for us to remember that and to remind ourselves of this, that, you know, we're talking about systemic and systematic change, and the language we use and the conversations we have, and we can support and create opportunities for women. But this is not an issue about women. But I think the solution is all of us coming together to be able to create some of that change that's needed in the system. Thank you, Roz. Joella, as we shift to thinking more than about inclusion and diversity in rural women's entrepreneurship, do you have any thoughts on how organizations that want to better support women entrepreneurs in rural communities to do so in such a way that recognizes the intersectionality of women in rural communities, who are also racialized minorities, people with disabilities, Indigenous people, immigrants, and LGBTQIA2S+?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's like looking at those systems and including people from all of those different aspects of our community into the design process of your programs, of your organizations, to ensure that it really meets all of those needs. And so, you know, I'm trying to develop a program, a small business program in my community, and you know, I think it's accessible, but I really am trying to do my work, even though I know everyone, to include people, to make sure to that I'm reducing those barriers and doing the work up front from really a good place. And that's what, you know, our elders in our community have talked about, is like, just try to be a good person and model that behavior. And so treating people with respect and just that inclusivity from the very beginning. And I guess I also wanted to touch that part of like the message that I'm trying to get out to women in the community too, is that we can have businesses and we can make money to support ourselves in industries and ways that support our culture and support the connection to the land. That, you know, our region has been booming for a long time because of the mining industry. We know that not everybody wants to go work out there, and that always seems to be the option that people talk about. Oh, you should go work in the mine. So what I'm really trying to get across to people is that there are so many more options to people, and you can have business and make money in things that actually support our culture, support that connection to the land, and help us be better decision makers. Because for so long, the resource extraction industry has disconnected us from the land. And so trying to bring that back and really make sure that those values, connection to the land, people, health and wellness, that all of that is into our model, that it doesn't need to be, you don't need to be in those larger sectors to be able to do that.
Thank you. And that's a nice segue then into my next question for you, which is our last formal question. Joella, my sense that being an entrepreneur in Mayo for you is more than simply leveraging local resources, but that place and space is integral to who you are as a woman entrepreneur and even your business model. Has that played a role in your success? And what other factors have played a role in your success as a rural woman entrepreneur?
Good question. I guess really what I tried to do, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is like when I bought this business, so I bought it from other women, I thought it was going to be a side hustle, that I was doing all of this other work in my community, working for my First Nation. But then when I really started to make it more about community and small business and connection to the land and sharing the stories of women in the North, that's the part that people are really attracted to. That I know people can go buy soap from local farmers markets, wherever each of you are. Yet people want that connection to the North. They want connection to those stories. There's an interest in learning. You know, on my Instagram feed, like people are always sharing stories with me about, you know, who they gifted to and those stories. So really trying to, again, amplify the voices of women of the North, because these voices haven't been heard around the world, and certainly in Southern Canada also, right? And so just trying to leverage that. And then I think now it's still about the soap and it's about the stories, but now I'm getting asked a lot from other women, you know, how did you start your business? What, you know, how can you help me with this? Can you help me with an application? Those kind of things. So trying to do that and really about just trying to be an advocate for small business and women entrepreneurship, that it's really when you're supporting women entrepreneurs, it's really an efficient way for reconciliation, economic reconciliation. And dear friend Tira Fraser from Isqueo Air in BC, you know, she talks about that a lot, that if we are trying to achieve balance and promote women as entrepreneurs, it's really about investing in women and in the communities, and that's how we'll achieve, you know, wellness in all of our communities, is by supporting women entrepreneurs.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Joella. And I also want to again give that plug. If you haven't already, so if you haven't checked it while you've been listening to us, you really should check out our website, the Yukon Soaps Company, and see in particular, I mean, so many wonderfully beautiful soaps, but those beaded ones in particular, I am very excited to receive those. So please, everyone, check that out, please. And someone's put a note there that they're thinking about Christmas as well. So let's hope that people check out your site, Joella. I want to thank both Roz and Joella for being a part of our panel discussion, and they're going to stay here right now as we open up to the larger group, because I want to draw upon your insights and experiences as we do that. Before I switch though, what I'd like to do is to remind everyone, or maybe not even remind, to let you know that WEC has just recently released a sharing platform. And as I've already talked about, really one of the greatest gifts of WEC is this opportunity to bring us all together. We have these amazing webinars, but the platform allows people to connect on a daily basis if you have a question. So I'd encourage you to explore the new sharing platform. You can see the details there on the screen. It's available in French and English, and it allows members of the women's entrepreneurship ecosystem to draw from the knowledge and reach of the community and share their own learnings to access business opportunities and collaboratively tackle challenges. If you have a specific need, you can post an ask and someone will come forward to respond to help you. If you have something you want to share knowledge-wise with another member of the community, you can offer a give. So please check out and register for the sharing platform. what I want to do for, let's say, 15, 20 minutes before we pull things back to Megan to close is we want to hear what's on your mind today. And I know the chat has been fairly busy, and it's great to see all of that activity. We have both service providers and entrepreneurs with us today. And what I'd like to maybe to start, and if you look at the screen here, you can see we have about 50% service providers, 22% entrepreneurs. We have a few from government agencies and a few in the private sector, as well as researchers. I'm going to start with a question that perhaps is more directed to the entrepreneurs joining us, unless people have a question that they want to ask to the group. So before I take time from you in imposing a question, I'd like to leave it open to you as well. Anybody in our audience joining us today that has a specific question or discussion point for one of our panelists, or just more broadly? Okay then, so I am going to ask my first question. Any of the entrepreneurs with us, what grants or loan programs have your organizations taken an advantage of as a rural woman entrepreneur, and whether that's previous to COVID or as a part of COVID? And where do you wish there was more support available? And I believe PAX is going to monitor conversations if there are anything you'd like to add. Anyone out there wishing that there were more supports or specific supports available? So we do have a question here. I'm curious to know of any programs or supports for remote workers. Roz, I don't know if there's anything that comes to mind for you.
Well, like I say, in the remote communities in Ontario right now, in the north, there's only essential workers going in. So some of them are businesses that are working with other entrepreneurial businesses to provide things like, technology, computer services, and so on, and health services. Those are areas that are ongoing. But it's they are going to be really struggling because remote workers and the business in the remote communities have their struggles just because of the isolation and many of the things that Joelle talked about. The costs of shipping, how do they market in a way that's competitive if they have to, and I think there are lots of people out there that will pay the difference to get a product from a remote community. And we, again, need to do a better job of promoting what's happening in the remote communities and the work that's going on there and the value of that to all of us if the economy and the social economy of those communities is better. And we haven't figured it out in a way that I'm happy with. But if you're, I see someone is talking about working from home. Oh, I can talk a long time about that. I thought you were talking about the remote communities. That's what comes to mind for me. I'm finding that women are struggling with, many women are struggling with trying to juggle the childcare while they're on Zoom. So if I had children running around here now behind me, sticking their head in on the camera, etc., it's distracting. And as they try to do their work, that's been the biggest complaint that we've had, and also around the childcare. So I think women are starting to figure it out because women are very good at figuring out how to do things out of necessity. But a lot of them are saying, hey, you know what? This is the best ever for me. I started my business so they're saying to me and my team, I started my business so that I would be able to support my family at home at the hours that I needed to support them, and then I could do my business at the other hours. So part of pivoting their business now coming out of COVID, as we work with them, we'll be talking about that. You know, this is a new future now, right? This is a new future. If you have an opportunity to do something differently, what would that be like in your best dream? So I think all of us as women have, you know, I don't think we'll probably ever go back to working all in offices like we did before. We've learned now that viruses can be transmitted in a really challenging way for people to stay healthy if we're all massed together in an office. So I think, you know, as employers, we're going to have to figure that out. As businesses, we're going to have to figure it out. And for women, it's going to be, how are we going to balance our life and work, you know, our work with our family life? What's that going to look like? And look at it as an opportunity to make positive change in how they would like to live their life moving forward, and how they would like to educate their children, and you know, where they want to live, etc., and what kind of business that they want to operate. I think we have to look at it as an opportunity.
Thank you, Roz. And there's quite a lot of chat in the chat, which is great. I'm just going to draw attention to a couple. Anita makes reference to the fast-growing Canadian women-owned business for remote workers, Virtual Gurus, which we may want to check out. And another comment as well is, one of the challenges connecting with businesses who see the value of having virtual assistants who work remotely. It's as though it's not taken as seriously. So Kathleen is talking about launching her own virtual assistance business just next week to focus on supporting small biz and entrepreneurships rather than going for bigger companies. And so thank you, Kathleen, for sharing that. Lee, you have raised your hand as well. Do you want to come on and speak and share something with us?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me. I just have a quick question. Like, I've been operating my business for over 10 years. It's called Women in Biz Network, and we support women entrepreneurs through a mentor circle, which is essentially like an advisory board, where we have professionals with expertise in finance, HR, leadership, a variety of different areas, basically every area, even like a life coach for all of us that feel like we're just dying from role exhaustion. But when I set my company up over 10 years ago, I did set it up as a for-profit organization that operates as a social enterprise because of the red tape around being a not-for-profit, and also just my capacity to manage like an actual board, and I didn't have experience in that area. So we've been quite successful, but and really the success has been in helping, you know, over 30,000 women in the 10 years that we've had a variety of conferences and online events and mentoring circles at events that we've been invited to. My issue is, though, that the funding is mostly geared towards women in technology, and also those that have a not-for-profit status. And it seems that there are organizations out there that seem to get all of the funding. So like SheEO is an example of that. Like, I love that organization, but it, you know, even that is not accessible to a lot of women, because in order to be a part of that, you have to invest at least $1,000, which a lot of women don't have the capacity to do that. So you still feel like you're not able to really network with that organization, even though, as I said, they're doing amazing, incredible things by funding other entrepreneurs. But in order to be a part of that organization, you have to invest into it. And that's just not necessarily sustainable or possible for a lot of us out there. So I was just wondering what advice you would give organizations that operate as a social enterprise and are looking for opportunities to get funding, but don't know where to start, because every time I've personally looked into funding opportunities, they are geared towards, as I said, women in technology or not-for-profits.
Thank you, Lee. Roz, I'm going to ask you a question related to that. I'm going to transfer that to you. And the other related point we've seen in the chat is people are also asking about opportunities for startups, because many of the opportunities that are available have an expectation that there's some history of the business. So do you have any suggestions for Lee, but also more broadly in regards to where there might be opportunities for startups? For funding for startups?
Leanne put on there the CFDCs and small business centers. Their grants for starter companies and summer student companies and digital mainstream grants. The Paro Circle grants and loans are definitely for startup as well as growth. Biz growth, the stream of up to 7,500. For that stream, you only have to have started your business by March 1st, 2020, which is only a couple of months ago. I hear what you're saying. For us at Paro, when we say we have a business grant or loan, we include social enterprise. We see social enterprise as a business. It's a form of business in most cases. Now, in some cases, a social enterprise is a not-for-profit social enterprise. Now, that's where some of our funding wouldn't work, because you would be seen as a nonprofit and you would apply to the normal stream of not-for-profit funding. But for our circle money and our biz growth, if you're a for-profit social enterprise, we see that as a woman's business, because the expectation, however, has to be that you're going to make some money, right? You have a social goal, but you're also an enterprise, and an enterprise must make some money. So if you're going to get a grant and a loan from one of the Paro programs, there's an expectation that you can do a business canvas about your social enterprise and, describe the vision and the goals that may be social, but why are you doing it and so on. But there has to be an expectation of making money. And that's the recommendation I would give to you is, put it forward as a type of business that's doing good work. And I think there's more and more funding for social enterprise. And I know there's programming that we're working on supporting through SEDNet. I'm on the finance committee there, and the policy committee, and the people-centered committee, and a lot of our work is around social enterprise, and government is looking at supporting social enterprise. The programming has been delayed a bit, but it will be coming out. And I know there's WOSN, which someone that was on here, I don't know if they're still on there. They're providing training right now, but the idea is that later on that there will be some financial support. But Paro has been supporting social enterprise for many years. I think, again, is, information about how to best present yourself. And I think for women, that's a big part of how we have to support them.
Just quick question. Is Paro just for northern organizations, or can you be located in a major city?
Yes, Paro now serves all of Ontario with our circles. So just about all our programming now is Ontario. However, for our Biz Growth program, the funder is for Northern Ontario. So therefore, we have to, that program, the funding for Biz Growth is only for Northern Ontario. But Northern Ontario is from Bracebridge in the south to over to Manitoba and all across and north into Indigenous communities. So it's like 3/4 of Ontario. But for our circles, you can be in a circle from anywhere in Ontario, and you can access counseling and training, our weekly Wednesday webinars are going out through all of Ontario. There's no cost to them. We have our morning coffee talks. We have our round tables to discuss how we can share information about helping the businesses across Ontario. So if you go to our Facebook sites, and we have many there, but our main one is at Perro Center, you will see all the activities that are going on and that are pan Ontario. 90% or more is pan Ontario.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Rob. And
Yeah.
Lee, you're probably watching the chat, but we've had a number. So Ashley's come in from Wozen. We've also had
Yeah.
some other links coming through. Megan, can you confirm for me in the recording of this that people will also have access to the chat information as well later?
I believe so. We'll certainly do our very
Yes.
best to make sure that's possible.
Yeah, because there's some wonderful resources now being shared in the chat. It would be a shame for us to not be able to share those after this session. I am mindful of the time, and I want to hand it back to Megan in just a couple of minutes to clue everything up. Before I do that, I would like to go back to Joella and Rosalind to see if there's any departing or final thoughts that they want to offer in regards to supporting rural entrepreneurship, or advice even that they might give to rural entrepreneurs who might be with us, or if any of us know rural entrepreneurs or thinking about it, what we might want them to hear. So Joella, I'm going to see what's on your mind as kind of the departing thoughts.
Yeah, I guess so. One of the things that I try to remind women that I work with is that in our cultural traditionally, everybody had a role. You didn't have to be an expert in everything, and that there were other people within, you know, the village, the community, the bigger network, who everybody had skills and contributed. And so to look at that model again, that I think as women and perhaps more rural, we really think that we need to do everything ourselves. And so reaching out, asking for help, and just, you know, acknowledging that you can't do everything and that somebody else is an expert in that, and that's, you know, the way to go, and to build those networks. And looking back at those systems of trade networks, so whether that's trading of knowledge or products or gifts, and really leveraging those kind of traditional systems, and keeping at the heart your values, and that will come through in your business, your product, and that's what people really want to see. And then again, just continue for everyone to leverage Indigenous business. That there are so many ways now, I think, that people can be supporting Indigenous business across Canada, and there are different networks out there to find out who's out there and who's doing incredible things. And yeah, just again, that when you are investing and supporting Indigenous women, you're really supporting the entire community. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Rosalind, your final thoughts for today.
Well, Joella is right on. You know, I think women innately know that supporting each other is really important. And I think, you know, being kind to each other is really important. And that includes when someone reaches out to you and asks you a question, that you answer the very best that you can. The other thing that I would say for women is trust your intuition. So many times when I was younger, you know, you'd be in a meeting and you were saying, well, I'm not sure if I should speak up and say that, right? And now I've learned sometimes if I don't say it, no one will, which is really important. So I have to make sure that, you know, the advocacy for women is there. And it's important that I take that responsibility to speak up, even though people might roll their eyes or whatever. That's their problem. That's their bias. I make it as a very important part of everything I do, that women's equality Equity for women across Canada is a big part of my passion in life. And I think if all women felt that anything that they have to offer to support each other, you know, women would be, you know, increasingly we are the women entrepreneurs, right? There's more, the entrepreneurs, I should say. You know, we just need to find a way to support each other so that we're more visible, that we get our information out to all. And with the women's movement, you can do that because we have our LinkedIn and our Facebook pages, and you know, we talk to people every day. So that's, I think, how we will empower women entrepreneurs across Canada. We're going to have to do it together.
Thank you very much, Roz. And, you know, I mean, so many things I personally will take away today to bring back to our WEC hub. But one of the other things is when we see so many people on here, one of the things I think we need to be doing more of, and we can all do that, is not only sharing our knowledge, but also sharing the stories of successful women entrepreneurs in rural communities across our country. So let's make sure that let's get that list of rural women entrepreneurs across our country and share those stories so that we can buy products and services from each other, but actually we can also change the representation of what we see and what we hear of rural entrepreneurship that actually doesn't reflect the experience of the women entrepreneurs that are talking here today and have been a part of this. So thank you, Joella. Thank you, Rosalind. It's been a pleasure to facilitate the conversation today. And I'm going to hand it over to Megan to have the final words and talk about what's next for WEC. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dina, and everybody on the panel. This was a really great discussion. And Roz, as you were saying, giving your parting comments, one of the things that just popped into my head and I couldn't get it out, our partners at the Canadian Women's Foundation have a mantra, until all of us have made it, none of us have. And it just, you know, that it sticks with me and it really sort of resonates when we have conversations like this. You know, I appreciated the conversation today in helping us understand some of the challenges being faced by rural women entrepreneurs, from broadband and shipping and logistics to balancing family care and home life. Through these uncertain times and beyond, it's clear that there are very real gaps being faced disproportionately by women entrepreneurs, and especially in rural settings. You know, we know from our research that women represent about 16% of SME owners with employees, but 38% of self-employed Canadians. And most of these self-employed entrepreneurs, as the panel quite rightly noted, were not eligible for supports during COVID that were being rolled out by the government. We, as well as many of our partners, quite successfully advocated to the government for changes to some of the eligibility criteria so that women weren't being left behind, but it didn't address all these issues. And women, particularly rural and Indigenous women, as well as, you know, a number of other underrepresented groups, were not able to access many of the supports provided, and those barriers persist today. One of the upcoming events that I'm really excited about that WEC is planning is a workshop on how and why to incorporate. We'll be partnering with experts from a few different relevant sectors to take the WEC ecosystem through, in an accessible manner, how to navigate the process and take their business to the next level. Here at WEC, the team is working with a growing network of over 200 partner organizations across Canada, including so many who joined the call today, to build capacity and knowledge in the ecosystem. From our training programs in the spring on how to access COVID supports to an exciting lineup of upcoming webinars, workshops, programs, we are working and responding to support this incredible ecosystem we're all a part of. We're also continuing to be active on the WEC FWE sharing platform, which Gina mentioned. The sharing platform was a bit of a COVID collaboration. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Pax. A bit of a COVID collaboration between WEC and our friends at SheEO and the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs. SheEO had built this platform for their venture networks and was getting quite a lot of use in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic. And so in a few quick conversations, we decided it was feasible to build a public version and share with the broader community. The whole thing happened in about a month, as Amanda and Janneke, who's on the call today, can attest. And it was a bit of a whirlwind, but we now have hundreds of women entrepreneurs and service providers active on the platform, supporting the ecosystem on an ongoing basis. We're also leading weekly Zoom sessions to build the muscle of asking for help and supporting each other in real time on Thursdays from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Yes, that's in 2 hours or 1 hour. If you'd like to join today and learn a little bit more, someone from my team can pop the link into the chat. And with that, thank you so much, Gina, for moderating a great discussion, and to our panelists, Roz and Joella, for sharing your experience and insight with us today. Thank you as well to the incredible WEC team who helped pull today's program together. The hard work of Pax, Amanda, Nicholas, Brooke, and Ashley really made this and so much of the work that WEC does possible. We will be sending around a follow-up email, including a recording, feedback survey, and information about exciting upcoming WEC events, as well as others through our ecosystem. So please stay tuned for that. And thanks everyone once again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you to all for listening. You're great listeners. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you, Roz, and nice to meet you, Joella.
Same here.
It was so good to see everyone.
From the Yukon to Newfoundland, we did well.
Yeah. Love that regional representation.
Yes.
Thanks, Roz. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm glad I was able to stay on.
Yeah,
It was
no
amazing.
kidding.
I was having such trouble before we started, so.
Oh, I know. I was a little worried about the internet, but we got there.
That's right. We got there.
All right. Well, once again, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
All right.